Will permanent fee caps actually reign in delivery apps? Last week, San Francisco's Board of Supervisors, not advisors, voted unanimously to approve a permanent cap on the delivery fees third-party apps like DoorDash and GrubHub are allowing to charge restaurants for each order. It is the first permanent cap on delivery fees in the country, potentially heralding a lasting shift in the way that delivery apps charge restaurants and consumers as the industry emerges from the pandemic. Complaints about exorbitant delivery commissions as high as 30% in some instances were not uncommon before the pandemic began. But they reached a pinnacle last year as many restaurants were forced to drastically alter their business models to include large-scale takeout and delivery operations. As cities and states across the country went into lockdown and began imposing on-site dining restrictions, many restaurants were suddenly relying on third-party delivery apps for the bulk of their business. Restaurants operate on razor-thin margins in the best of times, so losing as much as 30% of profits on every sale was never going to work long-term for the majority of restaurants. Faced with the annihilation of the restaurant industry, major metropolitan areas, beginning with San Francisco and extending to Chicago, New York City, Portland, and Seattle, as well as many others, began passing temporary limits on what the apps could charge for delivery, with some cities setting a cap as low as 10%. Many of those temporary caps are set to expire in the coming weeks and months, prompting city and state legislators to question whether or not to extend them or make them permanent as the restaurant industry continues to struggle. The question comes at a pivotal moment. Delivery companies like GrubHub, Postmates, and UberEATS had their most successful year to date, raking in record revenues, and yet none of them are profitable. Only DoorDash managed to step out of the red last year, and it only did so for one quarter. Meanwhile, as restaurants resume on-site dining, as cities and states continue to open back up, many are still burdened by the debt they accumulated over the past year. Some have gotten relief from the government, but others are still pleading. And caught in the middle are consumers who are shouldering more of the costs. Katie Connors is the advisory board chair with the Independent Restaurant Alliance of Oregon, a nonprofit formed last year to advocate for small restaurants and their workers. She was part of the coalition that convinced lawmakers in Portland, Oregon to approve a 10% cap on delivery fees last July. As Portland's temporary restrictions approach their expiration date, she thinks the recent vote in San Francisco creates a path forward for cities and the rest of the country to enact similar legislation. Permanent regulation is going to be absolutely necessary moving forward because these companies are not regulated by anything, says Connors. Connors, who recently managed two popular fast casual restaurants in Portland, recognizes that consumer behavior shifts towards convenience, and as restaurant business models shift to keep up, it will be difficult, if not impossible, for restaurants to survive without establishing a presence on delivery platforms. But just as restaurants need the apps, so too do the apps need restaurants for now. And as things currently stand, the relationship between restaurants and apps feels like a collaboration, more like a hostage situation. The way that the structure is inherently set up by these companies is sort of exploitative, Connor says. It's not a partnership when its exploitative relationship are preying on the fact that these restaurants have no other options, and that, at least during the pandemic, the diners had no other options. Let's see. So I'm going to read this last paragraph here, and then we'll jump into the quick discussion at the end. In April 2020, San Francisco Mayor London Breed passed an emergency order that put a ceiling on the total fee that third-party delivery apps could charge restaurants, including delivery commissions, credit card fees, and service fees, at 15%. It was the first of its kind in the nation and set off a chain reaction of similar legislation in other progressive cities across the country. The San Francisco order was set to expire in August, but the Board of Supervisors vote makes it permanent. A pending amendment to the legislation does include a major concession to the delivery apps, permission to change restaurants' higher fee for marketing and additional services. If the amendment passes, restaurants in San Francisco could opt into higher commission fees, up from 15% to 25 or 30%, in exchange for better visibility in the app. The delivery companies were living on 15% full stop, says Lori Thomas, the executive director of the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. Now they have the ability to add marketing to the bill, so it's kind of a give. So, what do you guys think is going to happen? Do you think that the apps are going to be able to start charging that 25, 30% again? I mean, look, I'll hand it to DoorDash. They said that they, for 1 quarter, was able to get out of the red, but for 1 quarter only. And that's the biggest titan company of the gig economy when it comes to food delivery. So I hope things get better sooner than later. So once the economy starts coming together, I know we've been under a big hit right now, so we'll have to see what happens. But what do you guys think? Do you think that they're going to keep it temporary? Do you think it's going to be permanent with the change, with the fees, or what? And how do you think it's going to affect us as drivers?